Robert Bateman is Canada's most popular artist, internationally acclaimed for his wildlife paintings. For many years, he has celebrated the beauty and diversity of the natural world. His work is known for dramatic composition and powerful immediacy. Through his art, Robert Bateman has raised millions of dollars for conservation efforts around the world. He's a prominent spokesperson for the environment.
To get ideas of where we can go. There are places in the world that I think...
His books of art are perennial bestsellers. Thinking Like a Mountain, his newest book, is a departure. A collection of essays, his thoughts on global problems and solutions. He lives on British Columbia's Salt Spring Island. Here, Robert Bateman is, as always, down to earth.
I really believe in trails. All through the seasons you can hike the same trail, you hear different sounds, and you see different sights. Here's the Pioneer Road. This would have been a wagon road. The horses and wagons would have gone from one part of the island down into Fulford Harbor. So we'll just follow it along for a little ways. I love the gorgeous, lush, mossy forest. On Salt Spring Island you have different microclimates. If you're facing south and west, you have the Mediterranean type of climate. Gets a lot of sun. You get Gary Oak and Arbutus, and that's kind of like California. When you're facing north and east, which this is, you get more of an Alaskan kind of climate, or what you might have up in the Queen Charlottes, where you get moss-covered trees. If you look on up here, you can see epiphytic polypody ferns. Polypody meaning many-footed, and they normally grow on cliffs, but here they're growing up in the tree. I noticed these guys have had a bad night. We had a bit of a fairly deep frost last night, and they've all gone like this and sort of kind of cuddled up and huddled up to protect themselves from the cold. I'm actually planning on doing a painting of this tree sometime, I don't know what year, with a bald eagle in it in the rain, having rain coming down. One of the things about a lot of nature art is it's always shown when everything is beautiful and lovely, and actually nature can be very miserable a lot of the time. So I want to have this bald eagle all huddled up in misery and dripping wet in the rain, and this great kind of luxurious tree as the main subject. When I get into this beautiful mossy forest, I think of those lines of Longfellow. This is the forest primeval, the murmuring pines and the hemlock. We don't have any pines here, but there are a few hemlock. Mostly these are cedars, but I just think it has that ancient quality, probably just because of the moss and the humidity back here. This is the forest I used for my mountain gorilla painting called Intrusion. And I often use bits and pieces from all over the world I combine and put in different places, in totally different ecosystems. This isn't the exact tree, but it's very similar. And I know enough about mountain gorilla habitat that although the species of moss is probably not the same species of moss as one would have in Uganda or Rwanda or the Congo, it will do. And so I took some of the trees, I think it was a little bush just down behind me here. I changed the epiphytic ferns for the gorilla painting and changed the ground cover and had the gorilla kind of rushing past, sort of staring at the viewer as they came past. Such a wonderful sound. I never tire of the sound of the trickling stream. Wow, this is fantastic. I've actually never seen it like this before with all this ice. We had that hard frost last night, but it's just the right amount of water and the right amount of frost to produce these little ice forms. This is great. Just as you can't say you've seen one tree and you've seen them all, you can't say you've heard one waterfall or you've heard one brook and you've heard them all. Just standing here, I can hear 3 or 4 different waterfall and babbling brook sounds. You've got the waterfall up at the top of the falls with the little rivulets, then you got the big splash coming down. In some places the water is going under bits of ice and you get kind of a hollow gurgling sound. And then you get the sharper trickling sounds as it comes down past me here and goes down the valley. I think it's really important that we pay attention to the planet. In other words, pay attention to nature on the planet. For 2 reasons. One is it's such a fantastic and overwhelmingly beautiful and interesting thing to pay attention to. Nature is not only more complicated than we know, it's more complicated than we can know. That's one reason. The other reason is we should know the names of all the different things that are around us in nature. I think we should know the names of our neighbors of other species. Birgit and I know the names of virtually all the birds and most of the trees, but we're working on the names of a few other things. One of the tough ones would be the mosses, and Birgit has actually taught me the name of this particular moss. It's Hyloconium splendens, lovely name. Its other name, its common name is steppe moss. You see how it goes in little steps up there. Sorry, I don't know the name of this moss, but we'll get to it sometime. I think there are 2 different species of moss in here. I think it's even kind of nice, this little touch. There's a maple leaf, a young maple leaf that's hung up in a spider web, giving that another exciting visual thing to explore. And here are the big maple leaves, the great broadleaf maples that are dropping their leaves all around us now. They'll all be gone by spring, they'll be rotted out. I love the way these cedar roots interlock and kind of have a rhythmic weave back and forth. One going into another and then re-emerging and heading off in another direction. And then of course this has the added dimension of the wonderful carpeting of moss. When I first came to this clearing, I was almost overwhelmed. I'd just been in this beautiful, rich, dark, mossy forest, and suddenly I emerged into this pioneer clearing. A poem came to it's by Charles G.D. Roberts, one of my favorite authors. He wrote a lot about nature. Round the lone clearing, clearly the whitethroat calls. Across the marge of dusk and dewfall's coolness. High up in the amber and apple green sky, a nighthawk swoops and twangs her silver cord. No winds astir, but the poplar boughs breathe softly, and the smoke of dying brush fires stings the air. And that's what I felt when I first came into this clearing.
Down to Earth continues with artist Robert Bateman on Salt Spring Island, British Columbia.
First paddle I did in this very canoe along these shores back in the early 80s. It was smooth as glass and crystal clear blue water, little schools of fish skiffling along. Then I heard these little squeaks, sort of squealing squeaks up on the shore, and a family of otters were going along the shore and going into the water and going along the shore again. It was just one of the neatest paddles I've ever had. Here's Tortoise Island, or Tortoise Islet more properly. It's just a tiny little 1 acre island just a short distance away from the house. And we have this little cabin there, which is kind of a getaway. There's some cormorants. The ones with the yellowish, the bigger ones, those are double crested. And we're very lucky. There are often eagles here. They're great subject matter for painting. People sometimes ask me, what is your favorite thing to paint? And my answer is predators, things that have kind of a fierce look, and that may be why I like the eagles. Oh, look at this crab. What a gorgeous thing. Now this has obviously not been eaten by the otters, or it wouldn't be intact like this. But it is just such a marvelous piece of sculpture. I cannot imagine any work of art by Henry Moore or Barbara Hepworth or any other, world famous sculptor that can exceed this. And how you could ever think that up. The wonderful, wonderful forms and shapes. One could sit and draw that and get possibilities of it for months. I think I'll put it up on the picnic table for the next people to come along to appreciate. Here's one of my favorite trees. In fact, it's almost anybody's favorite tree here on the West Coast. It's called an arbutus. In California, they call them madrones. And it's a really unique tree. It has this incredibly smooth bark. In fact, I took my glove off so I could feel the bark. And although it keeps its leaves on through the winter, it's an evergreen in a sense, but it's not a coniferous tree, it's a deciduous tree. It loses the leaves before the dry season, but it keeps them all winter. However, it sheds its bark. There's always this new bark being renewed each year, and that's why it's kind of smooth, almost like a human skin that is in really great shape with wonderful muscles underneath. It is a very, very sensual tree. And it has beautiful red berries. In fact, there's one right here that the birds really love. Sometimes these arbutus trees are absolutely full of birds. You can see where there's a living bit of bark coming up here, carrying the life from the roots up to the rest of the tree. And this part of the tree has already passed away, but it has very, very dense wood. The dead ones make fabulous firewood, very, very high in BTUs or whatever energy unit you want to use. And the twigs, even the dead twigs, are automatically bonsai. The whole thing has this really gorgeous oriental look to it. I'm absolutely delighted that one of the main ground covers on tortoise is this polypody. And I've seen polypody all over the world. There are a number of different kinds. This one is primarily a ground cover, but in Ontario and other parts of the world you see them growing in crevices in rocks. You sometimes see them here as kind of epiphytes growing on trees. But it makes this really beautiful, almost uniform ground cover along the trails. I love coming out of the woods into this little beach. Just a totally different ecosystem. It's like creeping out into a different world. Now this shell stuff is an indication this used to be a major camping place for the native peoples, and they would have spent months here, possibly for centuries, maybe even 1,000 years. They would have spent time here gathering shells and eating them, and this shell beach is kind of like a midden. It's an indication of where they spent time over the years. Oh, another indication of native settlement are these crabapple trees. It's hard to tell because actually we're into December now. We're very near the winter solstice, and so we don't have any leaves and we don't have any crab apples. But this is a native apple tree. It's a small yellow apple that grows on this tree, full of vitamin C. And these crabapple trees were planted by the people because it gave them a good balance for their protein-rich and very high in the omega oils, the shellfish and the other fishes that they ate. These were an essential part of their diet. And here we have a wonderful tangle of bull kelp, one of the commonest and one of the most interesting plants in British Columbia. This one's been all beaten up. In fact, they usually get destroyed by the winter storms. And you see, it's a very long stem. They go on and on and on. They've got a holdfast, normally out in the ocean, and their leaves come from the top of this bulbous kind of protuberance here, which floats. So these float on the surface of the water, and the leaves are just beneath the surface in great big festoons. And I did the latest major painting I've done is of a great killer whale swimming past a grove, you might say, of these bull kelp. In one way, I really love this driftwood. It makes gorgeous subject matter. But another way, it really is a sad scene because most of these logs were cut. They're part of the logging industry. It's just left here to pile up and rot. It isn't even any good out here on the beach as it would be in the forest if it had died down and rotted, then it could form nurse trees where other trees could grow out of it and go back into the ecosystem. So they just sit here getting saturated with salt, and they are really a testimony to the carelessness and the thoughtlessness that we have had toward nature and our use of the forest. I sometimes think of this as my Ansel Adams tree. It's actually a juniper, and I just love the convoluted twist in it. And it just has all of these beautiful built-in rhythms. I know that, and I think everyone agrees, that the most beautiful piece of real estate in the universe is planet Earth. It's just an absolutely gorgeous, complex phenomenon. We can't even begin to see the variety and complexities in it now, and yet that is being wiped out. We are living in a disappearing world. If you like to say goodbye, this is say goodbye time. But I don't think anybody really likes to say goodbye. And there are two things we can do if we really want to have a good planet for our grandchildren and for our grandchildren's grandchildren. We can pay attention. That's why I think everybody should be a naturalist. That's why I think everybody should know the names of their neighbors of other species, the names of the birds, the trees, and the other plants around them. I mean everybody in the world. And the other thing, which is equally important, once you've paid attention, you know what to do, is to pay for it. Because nature is not a free lunch. There is no free lunch. And we can pay now or we can pay later. But everyone knows if we pay later, it's going to cost a whole lot more. That's just the reality of economics. And we have reason to hope because it's a growing wave of hope. There are 30,000 organizations in North America alone that are moving in this direction, who are willing to put their lives on the line and who are willing to pay attention and who are willing to pay for it. And I think it's worth it.